Sports Talk New York.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much to Bruce for covering while we figured out the technical issues. We talked about Richard. We talked about Jacob. We talked about Mac helping us out here. You are listening to the Call Sports New York live radio, talking New York sports. No interruptions, no ads, just straight sports talk like we all like it. My name is Kyle Fisher. If you didn't listen last week, first off, what are you doing? Second off, you should have the Call Sports on 24/7. Third off, my man Bruce, he passed it over. You may hear a little bit of distinction. If this is the first time you've heard me, if you didn't listen last week to myself and Richard, you may have heard me talking and been like, how's that guy sound? What are the things he's saying? Well, we might be talking New York sports, but myself, I am down from Philly, so we are going to be talking everything postseason. You may hear me talk a little bit of Phillies. And I know that you will find me annoying in that regard, but I promise we will talk plenty of New York, and we are going to start things off right on MLB postseason, as we mentioned, and we're going to get started with some New York Mets talk. Now, Mets fans, I know that you are not excited after yesterday's game. We saw the shots of the crowd. We saw folks wearing wigs and masks, and I'm sure there were painted folks driving home in their face paint, just depressed, stuck in traffic, stuck in New York City traffic, driving home from such a rough game. So for those of you who for some reason missed yesterday's Mets-Padres contest, Game 1, Max Scherzer on the mound. We talked about last week one of the most intimidating human beings on planet Earth when it comes to a sports perspective, and he fell flat. Very surprising from Max Scherzer. We know what he's done in the postseason. We know what he did back in 2019 for those Washington Nationals, getting pummeled. I believe he's gave up 7 runs. Coming into the game, he had only allowed two earned runs, he had allowed 2 earned runs or fewer in 17 starts during the season, and fell flat. Guys, we'd like to talk about how the starting pitching is going to carry you through the postseason, and that was supposed to be one of the Mets' clear advantages. But here we are today looking at the Mets being in an 0-1 deficit behind the Padres. Padres coming in almost ice cold on offense. Yes, we did get a little bit of support from Juan Soto, but really it has been the Manny Machado show, just to say the least. The Manny Machado show over there in San Diego. Once Tatis got suspended, we knew he wasn't going to come back. The Padres were hoping that they could get off the schneid, get a little bit of help from Juan Soto and Josh Bell, both players. Very, very frustrating to watch if you're a Padres fan. I'm sure that the Mets fans, watching them closely leading up to the this series eventually, obviously, facing a little bit of frustration. So, Jacob, I know we've talked. You are a Mets fan. You know just as much as I do about the Mets. What is your gut reaction to yesterday's game?
So for those of you who listen to the night shift, Monday through Friday, 9 p.m. to midnight, I'm pretty active in that discussion on there, and I said it last night. I still stand by it today, this afternoon. It's really hard to watch this team the way that they've been playing in big moments and not think, gee whiz, it's just another year for it's same old Mets, It's very hard to watch the fact that you put so much money into guys like Max Scherzer and Starling Marte. And to Starling Marte's credit, he played phenomenally for a guy who had his hand that had his finger that tightly wrapped, couldn't grip a baseball bat 5 days ago, like Bruce Shine so beautifully said. And it's really hard to watch all that because, like I said, what do you do if you're the GM of this team and you make all these decisions and you put the money in like the Wilpons never would, and you still come up short like this? What does 101 wins mean if you're still 0-2 in the wild card round? And I know that a lot of people complain about the lack of bat that the Mets got at the deadline. I understand that, but I said it last night and I still stand by it. If you're Billy Epler, I understand looking at what you've got and thinking that that's going to be enough because you have guys like Alvarez, Brett Beatty, and Mark Vientos lighting it up in the minors. You think and clearly they had to have known by that point they were gonna bring somebody up. You know, it wasn't like they were hoping to keep these guys in the oven for an entire other season. You had to think that you like what you had there. You have to think that based on the offensive production earlier in the season that might be enough to pull through. I understand the thought process at the front office at that point. But now that you've won the second most regular season wins in any Mets team of all time, and you go and you absolutely choke in the playoffs like you seem primed to, I don't know what you say. I don't know what the road is from here, especially when you have so much money tied up between guys like Francisco Lindor, who has been phenomenal this year as well, highest WAR of any shortstop in the league, as well as excellent on defense. And you have Max Scherzer, who had the lowest ERA of his career this year, but has shown that he just loses it 2 Octobers in a row. I don't know what the building block is. I don't know what you point to on the graph and say, this is the improvement that we can make.
Jacob, I think you're right. You know, looking in the moment, the real question is the offense being blanked yesterday? You know, obviously I'm not listening to daily sports talk in New York unless it's the call sports, of course, but I'm not listening to the local radio. I'm not listening to these guys who have their ads going all the time. We know about it, right? We're taking some cheap shots, but you know, these talking heads, right? I don't know if the guys are overreacting to the offense, right? People, especially people down in Philly, right? Like I said, I'm from Philadelphia. People love to revel in the fact that this feels like another Mets collapse, right? And until yesterday, it didn't really feel like that. For them losing the division, it's very frustrating, obviously, to have Atlanta catch up. But what people don't realize, this isn't like 08 or 07 when the Phillies caught them late in the season. This isn't some classic Mets September collapse.
Right.
This is a team that was extremely successful all season long. Despite having a 10.5 game lead on June 1st, the rest of the way, they still played at a pace that would have resulted in 95 wins in the regular season.
Mm-hmm.
They just got out to such a crazy start. And then Atlanta had such an amazing second half that they were able to catch up. This was not a collapse, and the offense helped carry them. Obviously, the pitching was huge. We know that the back end of the bullpen, guys like Diaz, Ottavino, I don't have the full bullpen in front of me due to the technical difficulties, but we've had these guys who showed up all season long, right? And it really did feel like you had a clear answer. You know, you get your 6 or 7 innings out of your starters, and then you have those 4 reliable arms at the back end of the bullpen. And in case the offense has an off day, which didn't feel like it a ton during the regular season, they even after Marte got hurt, right? They still felt like they were scoring runs and bunches, still felt like they were taking care of business. You know, the reemergence of Lindor, the reemergence and the constant improvement from Alonso really did shine through all season long. You know, like I said, as a Phillies fan myself, I always look for the ways to what can I say about the Mets? What can I kind of make fun of for my friends up in New York? What can I really, you know, the classic trope of another Mets collapse, like we mentioned. But I haven't found those things to talk about this year. It was like every move that they made with the new GM. I love Buck Showalter. I wanted Buck Showalter when we hired Gabe Kapler, and when they went to Girardi instead. We being the Phillies. Sorry, obviously I don't play for the team, but I do work there, so we'll talk about that later. But I wanted the Phillies to go after somebody like Buck, and he really did change the culture there. You know, these young guys turning into veterans. You know, Alonso. A lot of people wanted to say that he was a clown, but the maturity that he's shown, especially having these veterans brought in like Scherzer, DeGrom coming back and being a stud like usual. You know, it didn't feel like a September collapse for the Mets, and then all of a sudden last night goes the way it goes, and Scherzer's supposed to be the ultimate stopper, and you look around the crowd, you look around, and what do you say about it, right? So
right.
Obviously tonight is going to be a different story, right? We have Game 2 will be coming your way. I think that's what the 8:37 game. Is that where we're looking at, Jacob?
Yes, yeah, that's what we're looking at.
Yeah, so you have Snell and DeGrom on the mound. You know, DeGrom is your second stopper. You basically built the team around these two guys. The question is, we talked about what moves does the GM need to make to prevent it feeling from like this at any point. Well, one of the biggest questions is going to be, what do you do with Jacob deGrom as soon as the season's over? This could be in theory, this could be deGrom's very last start for the New York Mets. He's expressed his desire to test free agency, which means he's likely to opt out after the season. And then
I think it is his last start, Kyle. I'm gonna be completely frank with you. As a Mets fan, I think it's his last start.
Yeah, where do you think he ends up then? We're sidetracked for a moment, and we'll come back to the series. But
yeah, I'm not entirely sure where he ends up. I don't think the Braves. I think that's kind of an overblown situation. But I think that if you look at it from the perspective of deGrom, who got handed this terrible contract, this contract that aged like milk from Brodie Van Wagenen, you have to be a little frustrated with that. But I also think that if you look at it from the Mets' perspective, it's kind of the same deal with Aaron Judge, but with a little more caveat to it. Because the fact of the matter is, Jacob deGrom, no matter what his performance is today, is going to command a great deal of money from this market. And it's not going to be pretty in terms of that. That being said, I think that you have to have a little bit of caution if you're the Mets, because of the injury history, obviously, but also I look at his performance this year and I try to give the Mets everything that I can. I try to be a very sunny disposition guy about this team, despite how many years have taken off my life. And I think that I don't see the same guy that I saw winning 2, almost 3 Cy Youngs before the injury. I see a guy who, while dominant for the first 5, somehow seems to just completely lose. His stamina isn't there. And I think that something that you have to be wary of too is with this blood blister and everything, the guy in big spots is having a bit of trouble, which is, I know that a lot of people want to say that he's only having trouble because with the perspective of two-time Cy Young winner, he looks human. But the fact of the matter is, I don't think he's going to be worth the amount of money that he's going to command or the amount of years. I think that he's going to get the big contract he wants from whoever decides to offer it. But I think that the Mets should be very wary of that number. And as a guy who's shown that he's not he's not loyal in the way of like a Brandon Nimmo who wants nothing more than to play for the Mets again next year. He's shown that he's willing to weigh his options. I think he's going to find a better option. I don't know if that's the Braves, but I think that it's somewhere for sure. And I don't think it's going to be Citi Field.
That's fair, and I think that the Braves are an interesting option. I didn't even think about them. Your instinct goes to the big spenders. The Cubs are in the middle of a rebuild. Do they want to go out and spend money? They're trying to make this a quicker rebuild than normal. Are we talking about having an Angels try and spend on another former New York Met pitcher? Things didn't go so well with Syndergaard now with the Phillies. But do they pony up and spend some money there? Not that they have a ton of money coming off the books in order to do so. So the final,
that final really choice or decision is going to be interesting to see. But most importantly, before we get to the offseason, we have to talk about what he's going to do tomorrow, right? Regardless of what his loyalty lies, regardless of where he's thinking about going, regardless of any of that, he has a job to do. And that job is to be the stopper that he's supposed to be the stud, be the 2-time Cy Young winner. I know that the blister is an issue, right? I mean, blisters for pitchers seem to be a serious deal. I'm not a pitcher myself, but blisters bother me. I'm not somebody who can deal with stuff like that. There's a reason I'm not an athlete, right? But looking just at the matchup. So we'll come back and revisit. But deGrom, we know how good he's been, right? Coming back off of the injury. deGrom, 3.08 ERA this season, 14.3 Ks per 9, 0.75 whip. If those numbers were sustainable over the entire season, we'd be talking about him in the Cy Young conversation next to Sandy Alcantara. The big thing is at home, right? the benefit of having that third best or the third best record, unfortunately not resulting in a first round bye, but getting that home field advantage. You get to play at home in his limited time this season. 4-1 at home, 2.52 ERA, 15.9 Ks per nine, and a .59 WHIP. He doesn't let people get on base, and we can look at the results from last night. There's guys who nobody expected to be a hero last night. Trent Grisham, Josh Bell was hitting like 143 since the trade. He comes up big and gets to DeGrom early. Scherzer early. That almost feels like a fluke compared to how San Diego has played recently. Momentum is, people talk about momentum being big in sports, but how much momentum really is there day to day? A new guy coming in, lineup seeing him from its guy pitching from a different side. It's all these factors. We know how good DeGrom's good is, and he's been dominant at home. His numbers very inflated compared to his home numbers on the road. The only issue that I see, right, we talked about that blister, the last month specifically, his numbers have taken a dip. In the last 28 days, a 6.0 ERA from Jacob DeGrom. Like, nobody expects that, right? The 1.14 WHIP, not that excessive. That's pretty standard especially for today's game, but not really something to be too concerned about. That ERA, I know that we can look under the we can look at some of the other advanced metrics and probably dissect where he stands a little bit. Maybe ERA might not be your favorite number nowadays, but when push comes to shove, if he's averaging 6 runs per 9, that's not going to get it done tomorrow. And again, we went from the Manny Machado show, and yes, he showed up yesterday, but to have all the additional support that he had and these guys growing confidence, if we can get to Scherzer, no problem, we can get to DeGrom. Jacob, I don't know. Do you have confidence in DeGrom going tonight? Do you think we're going to turn it around to Bassett?
I have confidence that DeGrom will start. I think that he will. I think that I have less confidence in DeGrom starting and more confidence in the idea. If I'm talking purely from the idea of what's going to win this ball game for the Mets, I think I have moderate faith in DeGrom, if only because DeGrom is a big game pitcher by nature. I think that I like the way that I like how shut down he is. I like that he doesn't pitch to contact. I think that will bode well. However, I have more confidence in the idea that the Mets' strategy has to change from running on Yu Darvish like it was last night, which I thought was frankly a little ticky-tacky at times, especially when you see what they had to show for it. One solo shot from Eduardo Escobar, and more the idea of what I've been calling the Strider approach, kind of like the Jordan rules and of the Detroit Pistons, where you look at what Blake Snell has been able to do to this team, and the only way out of it with this death by single ball game approach that they've been using is to frustrate him into 75 pitches through 3 or 4. The only way out of it is to extend these at-bats, have good plate judgment, which was a real problem last night. If you're a Mets fan, you look at the indecision at the plate by guys like Pete Alonso, but you have to extend these at-bats. You have to tip off as many pitches as you can, hit for the foul even if you have to. But I think the only way out of this is to get Blake Snell out as soon as possible, because something that we've been talking about all week here at the call is the idea that the Padres bullpen is the one crack in their armor. It's the one thing you can turn to and say, this team stinks at this. Because you look at what guys like Josh Hader have done since coming to this team, and it's memeable. That's the only word that comes to mind for me. I remember when he first came in, Josh Hader had a 24 ERA as a Padre at a point. It was just nuts. So I think that's the only way out for the Mets, especially considering how wishy-washy their hitting has been. And hopefully DeGrom can hold on for 6, let's say, until you know that you have Blake Snell out of that game, and maybe the hitting can wake up.
Yeah, and we like you mentioned, I agree that the bullpen is probably their weak point. That's why they went out and got a Josh Hader. Maybe a telltale sign is that Milwaukee's been willing to trade him the last 2 seasons. That's always when you have a closer of his caliber historically, and the team who has him, who's in the playoff hunt, is like, yeah, no, go ahead, you can have him. That's great. What do they know that we don't? Right. That's kind of what the overall message from my perspective was. Ends up with a 5.22 ERA. Looking at, like you said, his numbers since joining San Diego have been very rough, but looking at the last month, he started to find it, and that is a worry, right? So I agree that the key for the Mets today is going to be get Blake Snell out of the game. He's found some of that magic that he had with Tampa Bay. He's been going a little bit longer in games, but he's not traditionally this 7+ inning guy monster. Let's not look past the fact that in the last 30 days, over the last month in 5 starts, he's got a 2.17 ERA. He's not a huge strikeout guy, but 11.5 Ks per 9, an under 1 dot whip. So he's been keeping people in check. Over his last 7 starts, 1.76 ERA. We know what the defense can be in San Diego, especially with Bell being at first. The mix and matching that they have in the middle infield. One of the reasons that their offense have struggled is because they have good defensive outfielders. So it's going to come down to getting Snell out of the game and getting to the bullpen before they can turn it over to Hader. Because, like I said, in his last month, let's take a look at it real quick. His last month, 0 ERA in 9 appearances, 8.1 innings pitched, 0.6 whip, 13 Ks in those 9 innings. He's like you said, it was memeable at one point, but the man has started to find it, and he's a dangerous weapon again. So the key for the Mets is going to be that if DeGrom can do what we know he can do, it's going to come down to the Mets hitters being patient. Like you said, fouling off. Let McNeil and Guillorme and Nimmo go up there and just do what they do and be nuisances and be annoying. You talked about Brandon Nimmo. Man, when that guy said that he wants nothing more to play for the Mets, that was disappointing as a team who, prior to the Brandon Marsh trade, as a fan of a team rather, prior to the Brandon Marsh trade, who was in desperate need of a center fielder, I couldn't wait for that man to hit free agency so the Phillies could go spend what we might call stupid money, as Dombrowski phrased it prior to the season. Just as a reminder, folks, we're going to keep talking a little bit Mets. We're going to hop over to the rest of the MLB postseason. But just as a reminder, everybody, you're listening to I'm Kyle Fisher, and you're listening to the Call Sports, your home for ad-free, interruption-free New York sports talk. We're talking MLB. We're talking Mets postseason. We're going to get into the Guardians and the Rays tied in the 9th inning right now, as they will be the Yankees' next postseason opponent, the winner of that series. If you want to join the conversation, give me your thoughts. Rip me for being a Phillies fan. We scored 6 runs in the 9th. It was a fluke, right? Feel free to tell me all about why you hate me and why the Mets are going to get it done on the backs of DeGrom and Bassett. Call us at 917-793-1717. You can text into the show. Make sure you're checking out our Twitter at The Call Sports. You can check me out on Twitter at KyleFisher45. Again, tell me why you disagree or agree with any of the points that we have today. Jacob, I don't know what much else there is to say about the Mets right now. We can always revisit, but the big thing, like we said, is going to be, can these guys be patient? Can they run up the pitch count on Blake Snell? Buck, for everything that happened to Scherzer last night, Buck came out and said the number one thing is you have to hit. And yesterday in the first few innings, they had a man on third with less than 2 outs and couldn't score a run. It's very clear that the big thing is going to be the offense, and we'll revisit that a little bit later in the show. I've mentioned it a few times. I promise we won't spend all day here, even if I would like to. Phillies also in the postseason, scratching their way in. NL East showing out in the postseason. We have Phillies up 1-0 on the Cardinals, scratched in as the 6th seed, barely getting in, but a dominant performance from both Zach Wheeler and it was who was on the mound for the Cardinals. I know they have Michaelis going tonight. Quintana really showing up, and especially the Phillies being very strong against left-handers this season. A surprise that the Cardinals were going to go with Quintana, and then he showed why it should not have been a surprise. really dominating that Phillies lineup. The Phillies were able to get to the bullpen, maybe some unsung heroes coming on. Take a look at, they got to Ryan Helsley, the Cardinals closer. He allowed 4 earned runs versus the Phillies through July, August, and September combined. He only let up 6 earned runs. That's how improbable this victory was for the Phillies coming through. I screamed in such a different tone when Jean Segura hit that ball through the infield that my daughter was petrified of me. She didn't even do the startle and cry. I mean, she was just staring at me wide-eyed, like, what in the world is going on? Some interesting notes, things that I found even more improbable, why or how the Phillies were able to come back. Really, when you stack the odds against them, Cardinals, after Hoskins struck out to start the 9th inning, the Cardinals had a 96.9% chance of winning. And the Phillies came back and won. Their best bullpen piece since he returned from the minor leagues, Jose Alvarado, gives up the bomb to the pinch hitter, Juan Yepes, and they still somehow come through. Jean Segura, who had the most games played in the major leagues without a postseason appearance, he comes up big time in the 9th inning. A lot of unsung heroes. JT Realmuto gets things rolling in the 9th inning. Just really, it really was a full team effort from the Phillies. And all of a sudden, the Titans are 1 win away from the NLDS taking on the Braves. One thing that's very interesting about this series. So I don't know, Jacob, what kind of information you had about this series coming in. A lot of the experts were talking about how the biggest difference was going to be the defense. We know the Cardinals can hit. We know that their pitching is strong. We know that the Phillies can hit, especially when healthy. We know that they can hit, even with Castellanos having a down season. Their bullpen, up and down, right? We knew that the bullpens were going to be the issues. Probably a few more reliable arms in the Cardinals bullpen. The starting staff, your top guys might go in the favor of the Phillies, but overall, a pretty even matchup. A lot of folks thought it was going to come down to the defense. And I heard an interesting stat on the radio the other day prior to game 1. Cardinals plus 70 defensive runs saved on the season. Phillies, I don't remember the exact number, it was roughly minus 36 defensive runs saved. And it came down to the 3 guys in the Cardinals infield who all have gold gloves. It was Donovan or Edman at second. You had obviously Goldschmidt, potential MVP at first. Right. Arenado put himself in the conversation at third. All 3 of those guys had a chance to make a play in the 9th, and not a single one could come up with the deciding play to keep the Phillies at bay. They put up 6 runs in the 9th. Cardinals add 1 more, but the Phillies are able to hold them off and get the victory. So, Jacob, I'm going to ask you honest opinion. As a Mets fan, 1, were you surprised the Phillies got in? Were you surprised, and how surprised were you that they were able to pull off the victory yesterday?
I was not surprised that Philly got in, because as much as I am one of those Mets fans who has a lot of things to say about the Phillies at times, I respect the fact that they built their team in a very specific way. I am one of those guys who, and I feel this way about baseball, basketball, football, what have you. I love when a team builds around a philosophy of play as opposed to a player. I think that that's where you see the best kinds of teams. I hate the Heatles. I hate the Brooklyn Nets, the way that they're built. I hate when you. I
Your boy
hate
Ben
that kind
Simmons.
Of stuff.
You sure?
Oh, well, I don't know if you've listened, but on my show, The Night Shift, we have a Ben Simmons free throw watch. Is what we're doing.
That's wonderful.
Every free throw that we're keeping track of his free throw percentage. On the other side of the river, we have a Julius Randle turnover watch. But back to the Phillies.
There you go.
Back to the Phillies. I appreciate that. I appreciate nights like last night where the philosophy of the team comes through. You see that these guys, and I think also this is where you look at a game and you think this is why we play the game, because a lot of this had to have been psychological too. I look back at how the Mets came back against the Phillies earlier this season with the 7-run inning, and how unreal that was. And I thought to myself at the time, what do you do if you're a baseball team and you have the game in your hand for so long, for 8 innings, and then all of a sudden the other team roars back into competition and takes over the game. And I feel the exact same way. I feel like the Phillies finally got to be on the giving end of that last night. And as a team that was, by all accounts, not supposed to be here, right? I heard a lot of, and I know this is partially because I'm in the New York market, but I heard a lot of people on social media counting out the Phillies earlier this season, especially when Joe Girardi got fired. But this team really put it together after that. They really found their rhythm, even, like you said, on and off season from Nick Castellanos. And I just have to, as much as I feel certain ways about the Phillies, I have to respect the hustle. And I have to give it, I have to tip my hat because, yeah, when the thing that you're trying to do works, it works. And like you said about the pitching and stuff, about the relievers, I was personally worried for you guys when I saw that the big signing in terms of relief was Jeurys Familia. I remember how that felt for me.
Oh man.
I was like, oh man,
So
that's
depressing.
where we're at. That's where we're at in Philadelphia. But no, I you gotta like what you're seeing from this team. They're playing up to the moment. They clearly have the chip on their shoulder as well. And I think that if you're the Cardinals, you have to look at it and think that, man, we really stooped down a little bit. We assumed things about this team based on the first 8 innings of play, but there's a reason why we play all of 9 innings. There's a reason we play the game of baseball, and it's nights like last night that proved that.
Yeah, I agree. It was very, interesting. Just a lot of just put the ball in play and see what happens. Right. We had a lot of moments where people coming up, Segura squeaking one underneath the glove. An odd moment, but it ended up working out where they put Edmundo Sosa in the game to pinch run for Alec Bohm to improve the defense at third base in the 9th inning. But he was not the go-ahead run. The go-ahead run was on second base in Nick Castellanos, who is not known for his speed in any way, shape, or form. He's one of the slowest guys him and Schwarber. We signed 2 big bats, and neither one of them can run to save their lives. And you still had the option where you could have moved around some of the defense, put maybe Nick Maton in the outfield and move Sosa to third base, even if you did pinch run him for Castellanos. And then Sosa ends up getting under the tag and adding that 4th run, which ended up being the deciding run as the Cardinals were able to get to Zach Eflin in the bottom of the 9th. I agree, man, that, building the identity. And unfortunately, they lived up to their identity all season of potentially one of the worst bullpens in baseball. You mentioned it for a moment. They went out and signed Brad Hand, who actually ended up having a pretty good season for them. But on paper, you were like, what? I don't understand this signing. And then Jeurys Familia. I mean, oh, my goodness. Bringing him into the fold. I just remember the Phillies crushing Familia when he was with the Mets, especially down the stretch. I know that he had a few good seasons there to start his career, but really just fell off big time. I understood the idea. They wanted to spend a little less money on the bullpen. Reliable Hector Neris. Maybe he wasn't the closer that you wanted him to be, but he signed for around the same amount of money, a 2-year deal, but around the same, a little bit more money than what Familia signed for. You spent a lot of money on Corey Knebel, who struggled, lost the closer's role, and then ended up on the injured list to end the season. But the Phillies get out of Game 1 with the surprise victory. Just checking in real quick, the 9th just ended in Cleveland, so we're looking at Guardians and Rays going to extras, which should be exciting. I'm going to ask, so Jacob, we haven't had too much time to get to know each other. It seems like you're more of a Mets fan than a Yankees fan. Are you a fan of both, or is it really split?
It's a real. I'm gonna give you the spiel I give everybody, Kyle. I am a sports fan that was born to suffer. I am born into a family that has saddled me with fandom of the Mets, the Jets, the New York Rangers, and the New York Knicks.
Oh, there it is.
So
there you go.
I know, if there is one thing I know, and I've even said this to my girlfriend, is that I am nothing if not loyal as a human being. I know nothing except dedication to things that will inevitably fail me. So there's no such thing to me as bandwagoning fan a team. I am a pure Mets, Jets, Knicks, Rangers fan. So yes, I'm a Mets fan to answer your
Nice.
question in a long-winded way.
No, I appreciate the clarity. So one thing I've always found interesting, right? And as a Phillies fan, I'm supposed to hate the Mets. It's just we're in the same division. It's New York. We kind of get little brothered by the entire Northeast, especially from a sports perspective. But the one thing that I've always said about the Mets, one, coming into the season, I felt like this roster was a very likable roster. Pete Alonso, as he's matured, a lot of people wanted to rip him for bobbing his head during the home run derby. I loved that stuff, man. Like just being out there, being a dude, loving the game. I loved the Lindor signing. He's one of my favorites before he came to the Mets. Now I have to hate him because it's my nature as a Philadelphia sports fan. But Nimmo's a guy you love. He's the modern day Charlie Hustle. He's a guy who you love to hate when you're playing against him, and you love to love if he's on your team. Guys, I wanted them to go out and get in Bassett, in Carrasco, in Kana. They really did build the roster in a new way. They have the top payroll in the majors. We could see some changes coming in the offseason there, but they spent the money on the correct players as opposed to the old regime that would just spend money to spend money so they could say that they did. And I've always felt and my Philadelphia friends are going to hate me for this. I've always felt a kinship with fans of the Mets, with fans of the Jets, because they're little brothered in their own city. It really is. They're treated like the second class of the city. And I'm sure that if I had two teams, I would have to have in my city still. I would have to have a similar take on it. But I've always felt like the Mets, I laugh at their misery because I'm a Philadelphia fan, but it's also because I can relate to it. We're a terrible franchise historically. I love that we've made the playoffs. We got off the drought, but I keep saying we. I think it's just the instinct of working at the stadium. But you almost feel that kinship with misery loves company, and and we've both had so many miserable moments historically that it really is something that I'm supposed to hate. But you find this weird way of relating to each other because it's just so miserable.
Well, everybody loves an underdog story, right? It's really hard to be the little brother to the New York Yankees of all teams, too, where they're a team that's known for their history and everything, and you're a franchise that's just hit 60 years this year. It's hard to sit through a lot of that. My host on the night shift is a huge Yankees fan, and we get into it a little bit sometimes, but I also want to just extend the pleasantries as well. My family when they first moved to the United States lived in Philadelphia, so I've got some roots out in Philly. I actually go out to Philly every once in a while, especially for concerts. I love the city. I look to move there sometime just because New York is so expensive at this point. It's not worth it.
Oh yeah.
I totally hear what you're saying with all those teams, because it's hard being bad for so long and sticking by those guys too. And I also, not to toot our own horn, but I think that the Mets do have a really likable roster just in terms of personnel this year. I mean, you look at guys like I'm even taking guys like Lindor, Alonso, DeGrom out of it, and Scherzer out of it, because I think that, of course, you're going to like the guys you're spending all that money on, like the stars of the game, right? Yeah. But you look at guys like Mark Canha and Starling Marte and Brandon Nimmo and Jeff McNeil, and they're just likable guys. I think that something about the fact that we kind of put together this team that, unless you are a homegrown Met, you're someone who's coming from a franchise like the Pittsburgh Pirates or the Oakland Athletics, where you were doing even less than you're doing now as a Mets player, and you take these guys together and put a 101 and get 101 wins out of it. That's a fantastic story. You look at guys who didn't have a ton of prospects despite being good individually, and they're putting something together here. It's just frustrating to see it all go down in the same way that it always does for the orange and blue. But yeah, I think that something to keep in mind too, and I've said this as a sunny disposition Mets fan. Buck Showalter is here, which Buck Showalter's a likable guy too. How do you not like it when a manager can go up to an umpire and know the game better than him, not once but twice during a season? And I think that you like this team, and it's not like this team is disbanding this year. The championship window doesn't close today if they lose.
For sure.
Yes, you look at the fact that Scherzer's getting up there in age, and DeGrom might be gone this offseason, but Buck Showalter is the manager of this team for the next 2 seasons. You have guys like McNeil, Alonso, Nimmo, who aren't young anymore, but they've been Mets for life. You look at the fact that you still have Canna and Marte under contract. I think you have a lot to like about the future of this team, as much as the present might suck. Ultimately, I think that bottom line, today's going to be tough. I don't see the Mets winning tonight, even if it's just a pure psychological disadvantage. I just think that this team, and we saw it last year in a much more pronounced way with guys with like guys really taking the onus on themselves to be the ego in the locker room. The McNeil Lindor raccoon in the stupid
raccoon in the
stupid
clubhouse.
raccoon in the clubhouse thing
They
will
were
be a date that lives in
the
infamy for
fans
me.
and all. Oh
yeah,
my God.
it was tough. It was tough last year because you saw guys who were not playing for each other, playing for themselves, and I think that while the team has been much better about it this season, you see them actually going out and being a synergistic unit. I think that the remnant of it is that you have emotional players, and it's hard to really shake that. I don't like when Pete Alonso snaps a bat across his knee every time that he goes 0 for 3, and I don't like the way that I see McNeil chirp with umpires afterwards, even if he's right. I think that this team gets in their own head a lot, and as a remnant of last year, and I think that once the team goes down the way they did last night, it's hard for them to bounce back the next day, especially in big moments where they expect to win, like they did in the Braves series, where they inevitably eventually got swept, and now tonight against a Padres team that is missing their biggest star and isn't built like the Braves. That's the big thing too. It's not like the Padres team is built for the home run, and yet here we are last night with 7 hits, 7 runs against Max Scherzer. It's just tough. I don't think they win tonight, but you got to look at the future and think that yes, you have some daunting front office moves ahead of you with DeGrom, Diaz, and Bassett all being up for re-signings. But I think that you have to like the future regardless, especially with, we haven't mentioned this yet, you have 3 position players that look great or look to be promising for the future with Alvarez, Brett Beatty, and Mark Vientos, as well as David Peterson and Tyler McGill, who are both in their first and second year as pitchers respectively, and have looked great when they start. They look a little shaky when they're in the bullpen. I imagine that's a tough transition when you're used to being that starter, but I think that the Mets don't have it's not like 2015 where things might change in a big way the next year. I think that the Mets have the foundation, which you have to give credit to the front office for. As much as you want to bemoan them for not getting that big bat at the deadline, you have to give props to the front office for taking a totally depleted Brodie Van Wagenen era farm system and kind of making something out of nothing.
I agree, man. I think that one thing that the Mets can always get credit for, especially recently, even if, like you said, the farm system felt depleted at one point, was their ability to develop pitching. And we saw it when in 2015 with those 4 studs, or guys who we thought were going to be studs moving forward. Now only one man remains on the Mets, Thor, now with the Phillies, but nowhere near the same guy that he was in New York. Just as a reminder, everybody, my name is Kyle Fisher. You're listening to The Call Sports, your home for ad-free, interruption-free New York sports talk. Right now, we are wrapping up a discussion about the Mets in the postseason. Feel free to join the conversation. We can always loop back. We'll go to some Yankees. We'll be talking some Giants and Jets shortly. You can give us a call. Give us a text. Number is 917-793-1717. Make sure you're checking us out on Twitter at The Call Sports, at Kyle Fisher 45. Let me know why the Phillies stink, and I'll tell you why you're wrong, baby. I promise you. But no, I'm not somebody who likes to yell. I'm not somebody who likes to get in arguments. I like fun discussions about sports because sports are fun. So come on, join the conversation, and we can go anywhere that the fans will enjoy. Jacob holding us down. Thanks again for helping out with the technical difficulties as the show got started.